You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Okay, Nathan, I have a confession. I have been living in my earbuds lately because Audible just dropped a brand new Pride and Prejudice, and it is everything.
Same, and not just any audiobook. This is an Audible original performed by a full cast. It's intimate, vibrant, modern, and it's got an original score by a Grammy-nominated composer. Honestly, it feels like Bridgerton meets Broadway in my headphones.
And let's give this cast their flowers. It stars Marisa Abella from Industry as our girl Elizabeth Bennet, Harris Dickinson as Mr. Darcy, and Glenn Close herself, the icon, as Lady Catherine de Bourgh. Like, hello.
Yeah, and when I tell you Marisa Abella brings you right inside Lizzie Bennet's stubborn, brilliant, messy little brain, it's like sipping tea with her while she side-eyes Darcy.
Exactly. And before Enemies to Lovers was the whole romantic genre that it is today, there was Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy, one of the greatest romances of all time, y'all.
Whether it's your first time or your 50th trip to Longbourn, this fresh modern take will have you falling in love with Austen's classics all over again.
So listen to the new Pride and Prejudice at audible.com/Jane Austen. That's audible.com/Jane Austen.
Hi, this is Katy.
And this is Nathan.
And you're listening to Queen's Podcast, the show about women in history.
Hello, my queens, and welcome to another week in Katie's Corner. So usually these episodes are kind of, what we're working on for the main part of the podcast. And even though we have moved on from Wars of the Roses, I still got some rabbit holes to go down with these people and the Wars and the Roses and the aftermath right afterwards. So there's going to be a couple of more Wars of the Roses related Katie's Corners. And today I want to discuss a woman that it's hard to find too much information on, but I've always been really curious about her. Her name is Lady Elizabeth Gordon, and she was the wife of Perkin Warbeck, the pretender to the English throne. So over on our All Levels Patreon, Nathan and I just covered Perkin Warbeck. So Nathan called him Perky Warboobs, which is adorable, very on brand for Nathan. So anyway, let's talk about Catherine, the wife of the great pretender. Lady Catherine was born 1474-ish. If she wouldn't have gone on to marry this famous dude, we'd most likely never know her name, never know who she was. So no one wrote her birthday down. So sometime around 1474 is all I can give you. To drop her in the timeline of the Wars of the Roses, that means she was about 11 years old when Henry Tudor defeated Richard III. But she's not in England. She is in Scotland. Our girl is Scottish. While she's not royalty, she is in the Scottish nobility. Her dad was an earl. His name was George Gordon, 2nd Earl of Huntly. What's annoying about researching women at this time is a lot of times there's not a lot on her. So you have to go and research the men in her life to gather context clues about how she was raised, how, her family dynamics and stuff. So that's what I had to do. Her dad inherited the earldom of Huntly from his father and was given at least 3 castles. All of them are more or less in the Highlands, with Inverness Castle being the most northern one. Longtime listeners know that I love going to castles, and that is one that is on my list. Scotland looks cold, though, so I want to go to the Inverness Castle in the summer sometime. So anyway, my educated guess is that she was probably raised and had most of her education out in more the country, the Highlands of Scotland. She had so many siblings. Her dad's personal life is a mess. His first wife came along, but she didn't last long. They didn't have any children, and that marriage was annulled a few years later. Then he married a princess, Annabelle of Scotland. Princess Annabelle was the daughter of James I, King of Scotland, and her mother was a Beaufort, because everybody in this story is related. Around the time he was married to the princess, he started seeing his mistress, a woman named Elizabeth Hay. During this marriage, the princess had definitely 2 children, but the records suck. The Earl had a shitload of children during their marriage, but it's hazy which ones belonged to Elizabeth Hay and which ones belonged to Princess Annabelle. So, Princess Annabelle definitely claimed 2 of them. The Earl filed for annulment from the princess, saying she was too closely related to his first wife, which seems faulty reasoning to me, but I guess the princess wanted out too, because the couple split and they got their annulment. Daddy Earl marries his mistress, Elizabeth Hay, and she's also a noblewoman. She's descended from the kings of Scotland. That is where our girl, Catherine Gordon, gets her, more royal blood from. Anyway, it sounds like a really busy household, because then after the Earl marries Elizabeth, they have their own children, born in wedlock, and Catherine Gordon is the first of those. Bless this mess. It sounds like the Earl has now settled down. So Catherine Gordon would have been, a pretty eligible bachelorette. However, being the middle daughter of an earl, she wasn't expected to make big marriage to somebody super important or anything, probably just to some other earl or something. All right, so we fast forward to 1495. I know there's a lot of ground we haven't covered, but again, there's just nothing for me to work with about her childhood. Her distant cousin is James IV of Scotland, so he's king. And Catherine, once she gets a little bit older, starts being a regular at court. So in 1495, she would have been about 21. Just a little about James IV and sort of what's going on in Scotland at the time. For centuries, England has been trying to claim Scottish lands, and for just as long, Scotland has been starting their own shit with England whenever they could. James IV, who will eventually marry Margaret Tudor to try to stop that fighting, which it doesn't, but he's a bit of a wild card. James IV had actually gone to battle against his own father, James III, because they're all named James over there. And his father was killed in that battle. It reminded me a lot of Edward III and Edward II, if you'll remember from our Isabella of France episode. His reputation is brutal. And, he did do penance for the rest of his life to try to, make up for it. But, I don't know, he's a complicated character. Side note, to make everything even more intertwined, in his youth, James IV had actually been betrothed to Cecily of York, Elizabeth of York's younger sister. Anyway, back to Lady Catherine. Though the Wars of the Roses wasn't happening in Scotland and probably didn't affect her life too much, the strife in England wouldn't have been foreign news to people at the Scottish court. Actually, Richard III had led an army against Scottish forces before he was king. So he was a really unpopular figure in Scotland already before he became a really unpopular figure in the world. So it's very likely that they would have been following those developments, and they would have heard about this wicked English king who killed 2 innocent princes. So I don't think the story of the princes in the tower would have been foreign to Lady Catherine Gordon. So Perkin Warbeck hits the scene in Scotland And he's got like his letters of reference from the French and the Burgundians. And James is just sort of like, all right, this guy checks out. So Lady Catherine Gordon would have been at least familiar with who he was claiming to be. How was our girl Catherine chosen to be like his bride? We don't know. Surely the king would have wanted to show the world in England that he believed this man's claims, or at least was like putting forward like he believed this man's claims, and he wanted to secure that with a marriage alliance. But Catherine seems like kind of a random choice, since she didn't come with any like huge dowry, and it definitely wouldn't have like helped any like diplomacy. It just kind of seems random. And if he was like meant to be the king, rightful king of England, she seems pretty low on the totem pole. Older historians did think that she was actually the daughter of Princess Annabella, and so therefore the first cousin of the king, but she wasn't. So she wasn't that closely related to the kings. She was much more distantly. My opinion, and this is just me looking at the situation and making an educated guess, I think Perkin just liked her. Like, she was said to have been really, really beautiful. And we know Perkin wrote her poetry, and like this really flowery and flattering poetry. However, one thing I did read said that the poem that survives to this day that he wrote her was kind of like a formula at the time. Like, it was a poetry by numbers, basically, where you just kind of like plug in the person's attributes, to make it fit your situation. But still, it's really nice. And I might be a little bit wooed by something like that, too. I won't read the whole thing because it's super long, but here's just like some excerpts. He says he believes that her beauty is rather divine than human beauty, and believes that you are not born in our days, but descend from the heavens. Okay, I can take that compliment. All right. Another line goes, I'm not only compelled to love, to adore, and worship you, but love makes me your slave. Okay. I think he's just got the hots for her, to be honest. Now, would her family have forced her into this marriage if she wasn't a willing participant? I really don't know. Typically, I'd like to look at the marriages of like maybe some of her sisters and stuff to see if that took the sisters' feelings into consideration, but there's just not that documentation. I can't really research that so much. And but like when I'm looking at it, I'm just like, she's just so random and so obscure. I just really tend to think that Perkin saw her and liked her, and she probably didn't protest it. So James was like, yeah, y'all can get married. Also, I have a feeling Perkin Warbeck was probably a hottie. So maybe she had the hots for him right back. So these are all educated guesses, but that is the way that this makes sense to me. So in our Perkin Warbeck episode, we discussed that everyone that met him was like, okay, that guy looks like Edward IV. And as we've discussed in the Elizabeth Woodville episode, Edward IV was 6 foot fine. He was supposed to be like just basically this Adonis in his younger days. So super tall, strong, just objectively hot. Also, one of his like aspects of his personality is that he's just really easy to talk to. Just kind of people are drawn to him. He's just kind of got like that swagger, that charisma. He's not somebody that struggles to make conversation with just about everybody, and just really charming. If this guy looks a lot like Edward IV and has that swagger and that charisma, yeah, I don't think it's unreasonable to think that Catherine Gordon was probably like, okay. They were married in 1496. He had arrived at court about a year before, so they did kind of have like a year to get to know each other, which is nice. Their wedding was an event. It was kind of treated like, a royal wedding. The king outfitted Perkin in royal attire. Annoyingly, we don't know what Catherine wore, but we know Perkin wore purple, which was, a color usually just worn by royalty because purple was like a really expensive color dye to get. So it appears that he was also given like special armor because there was a tournament and a joust in celebration of the wedding in Scotland. The couple is now known as the Duke and Duchess of York. So a year or so passes, and James IV is tired of Perkin. He is like no longer serving the diplomatic purpose. Like he hasn't gotten anything out of backing this guy. He's just like, let's get him out of here. So James is like, I'm going to give you some ships and some men, and then I'm kind of done with you after that. Like I've done my part. It wasn't uncommon for wives to stay behind if their husbands were going off to possibly go to war. Like if she had wanted to, it would have been normal for her to just stay back in Scotland. But she went with him. She followed him off to go try to claim his crown. So I think that just kind of backs my other theory. They just liked each other and she wanted to be with him.
Okay, y'all, cooler days are here, and you know I'm about to live in layers. That's why Quince has become my ride or die for fall. We're talking a $50 Mongolian cashmere. Yes, real cashmere that doesn't break the bank. Denim that hugs in all the right places. Coats that look like I robbed a designer showroom, but cost way, way less. Honestly, the quality is just as good, if not better. I've been rocking their cashmere crew necks like it is my podcasting uniform. Cozy enough to edit all day, cute enough to wear out to happy hour. And the secret? Quince works directly with ethical, top-tier factories that cut out the middleman. Translation: luxury without being Eleanor of Aquitaine looking for I need a King Richard size ransom over here price tag. So queens, treat yourself. Find your fall staple at Quince. Go to quince.com/queenspod for free shipping and 365-day returns. And hey, our Canadian listeners, guess what? You're in the club too now. That's QUINCE.com/queenspod.
35 gigabytes. If you're still overpaying for wireless, it's time to say yes to saying no. At Mint Mobile, their favorite word is no. No contracts, no monthly bills, no overages, no hidden fees, no BS. And here's why I said yes to making the switch and getting premium wireless for just $15 a month. Story time. A while back, I got my phone bill and genuinely thought I was being charged for like Henry VIII banquet. What is going on here? It was that high. But then a friend told me about Mint Mobile. I switched, I kept my phone, I kept my contacts, and y'all, that first $15 a month bill hit, and I felt like I'd just pulled off a royal heist. With Mint Mobile, I ditched my old overpriced wireless plan and its jaw-dropping bills, surprise overages, and sneaky little fees. All Mint plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text, all delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. And the best part? You can keep your own phone and number, and there's no awkward new phone, who dis, text to your friends. Honestly, the service has been just as good, if not better, than my old provider, and the savings are amazing. Ready to say yes to saying no? Make the switch at mintmobile.com/queens. That's mintmobile.com/queens. Upfront payment of $45 required, equivalent to $15 a month. Limited time, new customer offer for first 3 months only. Speeds may slow above 35 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details.
Two different articles and blog posts that I read to research this were one was from a website called The History Jar, which I love, and then there was another one from a website called historyofengland.co.uk, and both of them suggest that while they're getting on this boat to go to England, they are joined by their young son. Both of those blogs and articles say that they had a son named Richard. There are no official records saying this, so I don't know if that's true, but I mean, it's totally possible. There were two hot people that I think were probably in love, boning. It's just science, guys. He would have been really young, though, because they've only been married for about a year. So she's following Perkin, and he tries to get some support in Ireland. It's not really happening for him, so he heads to the south of England, to Cornwall, thinking that, okay, these people over there just got some of their taxes raised, so they're gonna, like, be on my side. I'm just gonna skim over this a little bit because we've already talked about it in our Perkin Warbeck episode of how that all went down. What you need to know, Catherine, more or less follows him. But when they get to Cornwall, Perkin is like, I don't want you to be in the middle of all this. So he sends Catherine and possibly little baby Richard to be safe. And so he sends them to, well, the records are murky about where he sends them to. Cornwall is kind of like a peninsula, like that area. So there are a couple little like fortresses like surrounded by water that it said that she went to. But either way, when she was found by the English, she was at a place called St. Michael's Mount in Cornwall, which I Googled it. It looks really pretty. It looks like a nice place to hide while your husband might be getting killed in war. So Henry VII's men barge in, and they have orders to bring her back to Henry VII. They also were given orders to treat her well and not to assault her or manhandle her. Thank God. When they show up, she was in all black in mourning attire, and Henry even gives them money to buy her more a full-on mourning travel gear or whatever. So it's unclear if maybe baby Richard had died and that's why she was wearing the mourning clothes, the all black, or if because she thought that her husband had died. We don't really know what the deal is, but we also don't hear about baby Richard again after this. So maybe he died there in Cornwall. Maybe he just disappeared after Henry's men found them. That's a whole different rabbit hole that we could, conspiracy theories that we could go down. But I don't think that they killed little baby Richard because of Catherine's actions later on. Catherine's husband was not dead, and they were both brought to meet Henry VII. And Henry VII's official court poet or whatever writes that Henry fell in love with Catherine at first sight. In fact, we didn't discuss this in the Elizabeth of York episode because there was just too much other stuff to cover. But it seems like the only woman that Henry VII even had a whiff of a public flirtation with was Lady Catherine Gordon. And while I personally don't think she returned those feelings of romantic feelings to Henry, I do think she would have been very aware of her current situation. So if he awkwardly flirted with her, because I do not imagine Henry VII being all that smooth with the ladies, she probably discreetly flirted back. Now, as far as being political captives go, these two had it pretty fucking good. Perkin was kept in his own lodgings, and Catherine became a lady-in-waiting to the Queen, Elizabeth of York. Catherine was really popular at court, and she and Lizzie became really good friends. If Elizabeth York was jealous of her husband's apparent infatuation with Catherine Gordon, we don't know. She didn't show it outwardly. Also, Elizabeth doesn't really strike me as the jealous type. So how fucking relieved is Catherine? Her husband has been trying to take over the crown of England, and his life has been spared. She's not living like a refugee. Things could have been going so much worse for them. I mean, Perkin was probably a wee bit tortured, a little bit, but he's alive. He's fed. he's clothed. And the only caveat is they can't sleep together. Some believe it was because of Henry's jealousy, but Nathan brought up a really good point in our Perkin Warbeck full episode, is that Henry didn't want them to have any kids, didn't want like this pretendership to be able to continue. Eventually, Perkin is executed for trying to escape his gilded cage, and Catherine is a widow now. If she mourned Perkin, it's not noted. I like to think that if she was still in love with him and she was like absolutely shattered that he was dead, that Elizabeth York was such a nice woman that she would have covered for her, like given her a couple of days off, so that she didn't have to be a public spectacle of grief, basically. So Henry VII has her declared as the victim of kidnapping and rape. She's not supposed to be referred to as the widow of Perkin Warbeck. Like, he didn't have any rights to annul their marriage or say that it had been like null and void the whole time, but he just wanted to make sure that her reputation was above reproach. And on one occasion, he even like directly paid for Elizabeth to have a new wardrobe, which goes so against that image that most of us have in our head of Henry VII of being this real cheapskate kind of guy. Some say he did this, because he was so in love with her, but also it could have been charity. She had no family there in England. She had no husband to support her there in England. I don't think her Scottish family was sending her money. That also makes me wonder why she didn't go back to Scotland. She stayed on as one of Elizabeth's ladies in waiting for the rest of Elizabeth's life. Maybe she'd just grown to love her new home. Everyone was really nice to her. Her boss was super nice to her. The king was super nice to her. Maybe if she had gone back to Scotland, she wouldn't have been accepted in the same way. Maybe James didn't want her there to remind him of like his diplomacy fail. I don't know. Whatever the reason, she stayed in England for the rest of her life. Elizabeth of York, her dear friend and her boss, dies. Catherine has now been at court for about 5 years, and she would have been about 30. Catherine served as Elizabeth's chief mourner, which is a foreign concept to me now, but back then that was a thing. Like, you had the person that mourned the loudest. I don't fucking know. So then I'm sure that Catherine was just sort of like, fuck, what do I do now? That was her source of income, being a lady in waiting to the queen, and now there's no queen. Her only reason to be at court was to serve Elizabeth. Well, Elizabeth is gone. And if she had any other leads for employment, it's definitely not documented. And it doesn't appear she had money coming in from anywhere else. And this is when people really start talking, because Henry let her stay at court rent-free. And she and Henry started spending a lot of time together. It seems that their main activity together was playing cards. That's when everybody started to whisper that she was his mistress. And a lot of people assumed that they might get married. But Henry knew that if he was going to remarry, it was going to have to be like for diplomatic reasons, and she didn't serve that purpose at all. However, we talked about it in the Elizabeth of York episode that he was like, oh, if I ever do marry again, I need her to have all these attributes, and basically described Elizabeth of York to a T. Well, maybe he saw a lot of his wife and Catherine. They were both beautiful, noble women, and Catherine had been Elizabeth's right-hand woman for a few years now. So maybe she picked up a lot of Elizabeth's traits, and he just found her comforting while he grieved. Once it became apparent that they would not be getting married, there was no like open romantic relationship. I have no idea. I just don't know enough I couldn't find enough information to like form an opinion if they were ever sleeping together. But for the rest of his life, she just kind of serves as a good friend. A lot of people say that he treated her like a sister, which I think is interesting because, Henry was an only child. He never experienced that relationship. And maybe having a sibling kind of relationship with somebody just really served him at that time in his life while he was mourning the loss of his wife. I don't know. Anyway, after Henry's death, Catherine was granted some lands And so she would have like enough income to support herself for the rest of her life. And in 1512, she marries again. Nothing really of note. She married 4 times total in her life. The last 3 were in pretty quick succession. None of them particularly noteworthy dudes, but maybe after her first marriage, she was like A-okay with like some boring nobodies. They all had jobs either like at court or like good enough jobs to afford, a nice enough house and a household with an employee or 2 in it. In or around 1530, she probably went back to work at court as Princess Mary's, like in her household. So, Mary Tudor, eldest daughter of Henry VIII. So even though Henry VII and Elizabeth of York were gone, she was obviously still really well respected and, on the mind of the royal family. She never had any children of her own, or any more children, depending on which story you believe. And she died in 1537 at around the age 58. In her will, she described herself in relation to her husbands, which was a normal thing. She didn't mention Perkin at all. Not super surprising. She mentioned her second husband kind of nonchalantly, like, this guy was my husband. But then her last 2 husbands, she referred to both of them as my dearly beloved husband or my beloved husband, or, something to indicate that she loved them. So it's very possible that her last 2 marriages were both love matches. And I really hope so. I hope she lived the end of her life just happily passing the time quietly. Because, dear God, she deserves some peace and quiet with a man that she loved. All right, well, that is the story, the Lady Catherine Gordon. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you guys next week. Cheers, bitches!
Hello, this is Matt from the Explorers Podcast. I want to invite you to join me on the voyages and journeys of the most famous explorers in the history of the world. These are the thrilling and captivating stories of Magellan, Shackleton, Lewis and Clark, and so many other famous and not so famous adventurers from throughout history. Go to explorerspodcast.com or just look us up on your podcast app. That's the Explorers Podcast.